At 4:47 a.m. on March 16th, a man in a janitor's uniform stood before the CEO of a $2 billion tech company and 17 executives in an emergency session. The company had 14 hours left before they lost a $100 million Pentagon contract. 6 months of failure, hundreds of engineers, millions in consulting fees. Nothing had worked. And now, their janitor, the guy who emptied their trash cans, was explaining quantum physics equations on their whiteboard. "Mr. James," the CEO said slowly, his voice carefully controlled, "are you telling me you solved in one night what our entire engineering department couldn't solve in 6 months?" James' hands were shaking. He was wearing his cleaning uniform. He smelled like floor wax. In his pocket was a crayon drawing from his 6-year-old son. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "I believe so." The room erupted. Half the executives thought it was a joke. The other half were furious that a janitor was wasting their final hours before catastrophic failure. What none of them knew, what they couldn't have known, was that the man holding a mop handle had been 3 months away from a PhD in quantum computing from Stanford before his life fell apart. They didn't know that he lost everything and is now in debts, but is only left with a desperate choice between finishing his dreams or feeding his newborn son. They didn't know he'd been cleaning their floors and overhearing their problems for 3 years, or that last night, something inside him finally broke, and he picked up a marker and did what he'd sworn he'd never do again. He tried to solve an impossible problem. The CEO stared at him for 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. Then he said 4 words that would change everything. "Show me it works." If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unseen connections that change lives, please like this video, comment your thoughts, and where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs it to stay motivated, and subscribe to our channel Kindness Arena. Your support keeps these powerful, true stories alive. James John pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway of Nexus Technologies at 11:47 p.m., just like he had every weeknight for the past 3 years. The wheels squeaked. He kept meaning to oil them, but somehow never did. Maybe he liked the sound. It reminded him he was still there, still moving, still pushing forward. The building was nearly empty at this hour. Just security guards, a few engineers burning the midnight oil, and him. Always him. He paused at the window overlooking the city, his reflection staring back, a thin man in his early 30s with permanently tired eyes and cleaning supplies where a briefcase should be. His son Tommy's drawing was folded in his shirt pocket, a crayon masterpiece of the two of them holding hands under a yellow sun. Tommy had written "Best Dad" in shaky 6-year-old letters. James touched the pocket and kept moving. 3 years ago, everything had been different. He'd been finishing his PhD in applied mathematics at Stanford, specializing in algorithmic optimization and quantum computing applications. Sarah had been 7 months pregnant, glowing, teasing him about naming their son Pythagoras if James didn't stop talking about mathematical theorems at dinner. Then came the complications. The emergency C-section. Tommy's first cry filling the delivery room while Sarah's monitors flatlined. The doctors tried everything. James had held her hand and felt it grow cold. In the months that followed, he dropped out of Stanford. His thesis sat unfinished on a laptop he couldn't bear to open. The medical bills had consumed their savings and more. His student insurance hadn't covered everything. Experimental treatments, specialists, the desperate final attempts, none of it had been enough, and all of it had been expensive. He needed a job immediately, something with night shifts, so he could be with Tommy during the day. His neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, watched Tommy in the evenings when James worked. He'd answered an ad for a janitor position at Nexus Technologies. That had been 3 years ago. Now Tommy was 6, asking questions about why other kids had mommies and he didn't. Why they lived in a small apartment instead of a house. Why Daddy was always so tired. James never had good answers. Just hugs and promises that it would be okay. He emptied a trash can outside conference room 7A, where someone had left pizza boxes and empty energy drink cans. Engineers, probably. They've been working crazy hours lately. The whole company had. James knew more about Nexus Technologies than most people realized. When you clean somewhere for 3 years, you absorb things. You overheard conversations. You saw the whiteboards before they were erased, the documents left on desks, the stress in people's faces. Nexus was on the verge of either spectacular success or catastrophic failure. The company had bet everything on Project Chimera, an AI-driven quantum computing system that would revolutionize data processing. The Pentagon had contracted them for a defense application worth $100 million. Wall Street was watching. The tech press called it the future of computing. But there were problems. James had heard the engineers arguing, seen the CEO's worried face during late-night meetings, and noticed how the testing facility lights stayed on around the clock. The system kept crashing. Random, inexplicable failures that corrupted data and shut everything down. They'd been troubleshooting for months with no success. The Pentagon deadline was in 2 days. If they failed, Nexus would collapse. 1,500 jobs would evaporate. The company's stock would crater. Investors would sue. Years of work will be wasted. James pushed his cart toward the testing facility on the 3rd floor. This was always his last stop, a massive room filled with servers, cooling systems, and Chimera itself, a sleek array of quantum processors that looked like something from a science fiction film. The room was empty tonight. Even the engineers had gone home to sleep, probably for the first time in days. The system sat idle, its status lights blinking amber. Not running. Not ready. James began his routine, emptying bins, wiping down surfaces, mopping the floor. He worked methodically, letting his mind wander the way it always did in the quiet hours. He thought about Tommy's parent-teacher conference next week, about the rent due in 5 days, about Mrs. Rodriguez's arthritis getting worse, and whether he'd need to find a different babysitter, about Tommy asking if they could get a dog, and James having to explain they couldn't afford one, about Sarah, always Sarah, and the life they should have had. He was mopping near the main server array when he noticed the whiteboard. Someone had left up a complex diagram, Chimera's processing architecture with handwritten notes scattered around it. Cascade failure at random intervals. Memory leak? No correlation found. Quantum decoherence. Temperature spikes. Causation unclear. Running out of time, James stopped mopping. He stared at the diagram. He shouldn't. It wasn't his place. He was the janitor. He cleaned and went home and took care of his son, and that was his life now. But he couldn't look away. His mind, that instrument he'd spent years sharpening in graduate school, the tool he'd locked away in survival mode, began to turn. Slowly at first, rusty from disuse, then faster. He looked at the processing architecture, the quantum gates, the error correction protocols. The classical computing interface manages the quantum operations. His eyes moved to the notes about cascade failures. Random intervals. No pattern. Except, James set down his mop. He moved closer to the whiteboard, his heart beating faster. It wasn't random. It couldn't be. Quantum systems were probabilistic, but they followed mathematical laws. There was always a pattern, always an underlying structure, even in apparent chaos. He picked up a marker someone had left on the tray. His hand hesitated. This was insane. He was a janitor. He had no right to touch their work. They'd fire him if they found out, and he couldn't afford to lose this job. Tommy depended on him, but his hand was already moving, sketching equations beside their diagrams. His mind was racing now, fully awake for the first time in 3 years, seeing the connections they'd missed. The problem wasn't hardware. It wasn't the quantum processors or the cooling system or the error correction. It was the timing synchronization between the quantum and classical components. James wrote faster, his mathematical notation flowing naturally despite the years away. The quantum operations were happening at intervals that created harmonic interference with the classical system's clock cycles, like two waves meeting and canceling each other out. The crashes weren't random. They were resonant cascade failures triggered by a timing mismatch, so subtle it would look like random noise unless you knew exactly where to look. He filled the whiteboard with calculations, then started on a second one, his cleaning forgotten. He derived the interference pattern mathematically, showed how it would appear as random crashes, then worked backward to find the solution. A timing offset. Simple, elegant. Adjust the synchronization protocol by 0.0000 3-4 seconds. A delay so small, it would be imperceptible to performance, but would shift the quantum operations out of phase with the interference pattern. James stepped back, marker still in his hand, breathing hard. It was there, the solution. He could see it clearly, mapped out in equations that would have made his Stanford advisors proud. Then reality crashed back. What was he doing? He was the janitor. They'd think he vandalized their whiteboard. They'd fire him, and he'd never get another job, not with a termination on his record. Tommy would suffer for his moment of stupid pride. James grabbed the eraser, ready to wipe everything away. The door opened. Dr. Patricia Hayes froze in the doorway, her security badge still in her hand. She was Nexus's chief technology officer, a brilliant engineer in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the permanently exhausted look of someone carrying impossible weight. Her eyes went from James to the white bars covered in his equations. James's stomach dropped. "Dr. Hayes, I'm sorry. I'll clean this up right now. I shouldn't have. Stop." Her voice was sharp. She moved into the room, her eyes scanning the white bars. "Don't erase anything." James stood frozen, the eraser in his hand, his career and Tommy's security hanging in the balance. Dr. Hayes walked slowly along the white bars, reading his work. Her expression was unreadable. The silence stretched out forever. Finally, she turned to face him. "Who are you?" "James John. I'm the night janitor. I've worked here for 3 years." "Dr. Hayes, I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't have touched. You're the janitor." She said it like she was testing the words, trying to make them make sense. "The janitor just solved Chimera's cascade failure." "I what?" She pointed at his equations. This is it. This is what we've been missing for 6 months. The timing synchronization harmonic interference." She laughed, a sound somewhere between hysteria and wonder. "It's so obvious now. How do we not see it?" James couldn't process what was happening. "You mean, is it correct?" "Correct? It's brilliant. She stopped, really looking at him for the first time. "How do you know this? Where did you study?" "Stanford. I was finishing my PhD in applied mathematics, specializing in algorithmic optimization and quantum computing applications." The words felt strange in his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. "But I dropped out 3 years ago." "Why?" James touched his pocket where Tommy's drawing was. "My wife died in childbirth. I had a newborn son and medical bills. I needed a job immediately, and you were hiring night janitors." Dr. Hayes sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "You've been cleaning this building for 3 years? With a PhD in quantum computing?" "Almost a PhD. I never finished." "Jesus Christ." She ran her hands through her hair. "Do you know what's happening in 2 days? The Pentagon deadline. I hear things. I know Chimera's been failing. Failing is an understatement. We're about to lose a $100 million contract. The company will collapse. Everyone here will lose their jobs, including you." She looked at the white bars again. "But if this works." "It should work," James said quietly. "Mathematics is sound. The interference pattern I derived matches the failure intervals you've been experiencing. Implementing a 0.00034 second timing offset in the synchronization protocol should eliminate the harmonic cascade." Dr. Hayes pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Marcus, the CEO. He needs to see this. Right now." "Wait." Panic flooded through James. "Dr. Hayes, I can't lose this job. I have a 6-year-old son. I can't afford." "Lose your job?" "Mr. James, I don't think you understand what just happened here." She was already dialing. "You didn't vandalize our whiteboard. You just saved this company." 20 minutes later, James stood in conference room 7A, the same room whose trash he'd emptied an hour earlier, facing 3 people. Dr. Hayes, Marcus and Gwynn, the CEO, and David Park, the chief operating officer. Marcus was a lean man in his 40s with sharp eyes and the controlled intensity of someone used to making $100 million decisions. He listened as Dr. Hayes explained what James had done, his expression giving nothing away. When she finished, Marcus turned to James. "Show me." They went down to the testing facility. James's hands shook as he explained his work, pointing to the equations, walking them through his reasoning. Dr. Hayes connected to Chimera's system, pulling up the code that controlled the timing synchronization. "Here," James said, pointing at the screen. "This is where you'd implement the offset. The quantum gate operations are synchronized to the classical system's clock at this function. You'd add a delay here precisely 0.000034 seconds, with microsecond precision." "If you're wrong," David said bluntly, "we've just wasted our last chance to fix this before the Pentagon inspection. We have one shot at a successful test run tomorrow before they arrive." "I understand," James said. Marcus studied him for a long moment. "Dr. Hayes, the mathematics is sound," she said. "I've reviewed it. This is graduate-level work, sophisticated enough that our team missed it. The harmonic interference theory explains every anomaly we've documented. If Mr. James is right, and I believe he is, this is our solution." "Implement it," Marcus said. They worked through the night. Dr. Hayes brought in her senior engineers, who arrived confused and disheveled from emergency calls. James walked them through his analysis, answering technical questions, explaining the mathematical foundations. Some of them were skeptical at first. Who was this janitor claiming to solve what they couldn't? But the mathematics spoke for itself. By 3 a.m, they were implementing the timing offset, making the precise adjustments to Chimera's synchronization protocol. At 4:30 a.m., they were ready to test. The testing facility is filled with engineers and executives. Someone had called the board members, who joined via video conference. Everyone knew what was at stake. James stood in the back, suddenly aware that he was wearing his janitor's uniform while everyone else wore business casual or engineering company shirts. He felt like an imposter, a fraud who'd stumbled into something far beyond his place. Tommy's drawing crinkled in his pocket when he shifted his weight. He wasn't a fraud. He was a father doing everything he could to survive, to provide, to keep going, and he happened to still be a mathematician, even if he tried to bury that part of himself. Dr. Hayes stood at the main console, initiating Chimera test sequence 771. All systems configured with the James timing offset. "James timing offset," someone whispered. They named it after the janitor. The room fell silent. Status displays flickered to life. Quantum processors hummed as they spun up, their cooling systems engaging with the software. James held his breath. Chimera came online. Data processing began, massive parallel computations that would take traditional supercomputers days to complete. The quantum processors handled the complex calculations, while the classical system managed the interface and error correction. Seconds passed, then minutes. The system had usually crashed within 90 seconds. They were 2 minutes now. 3. Processing stability at 99.7%, someone reported. Temperature normal. Error correction functioning optimally. Quantum coherence is maintained. For minutes. 5. No cascade failures detected. Timing synchronization showing perfect phase alignment. 0 harmonic interference. Marcus and Wynn's face remained impassive, but James saw his hands grip the back of a chair. 10 minutes. 15. Complete the full diagnostic sequence, Dr. Hayes ordered. "I want every system tested. Run it all the way through." They watched for an hour as Chimera performed flawlessly, executing the complex quantum computations that were supposed to revolutionize data processing. Every test passed. Every benchmark exceeded. The system that had been crashing randomly for 6 months ran perfectly with the timing offset James had calculated on their whiteboard. When Dr. Hayes finally shut down the test sequence, the room erupted in cheers. Marcus and Wynn walked directly to James. Everyone fell silent. "Mr. James," he said, "can you be here at 2 p.m. today? The Pentagon inspection team arrives at 3. I'd like you to be present." "Ah, yes, but I have to pick up my son from school at 3:30. And I should sleep. I've been up all night." And James stopped, realizing he was babbling. "Sorry. Yes, I can be here." Marcus smiled for the first time. "We'll make sure you pick up your son on time. Go home. Get some rest. And Mr. James," he extended his hand. "Thank you." James shook it, feeling like he was in a dream. James made it home at 6 a.m. Mrs. Rodriguez was already up, starting her day. "You're late," she said with concern. Everything okay? I think so. I'm not sure. Something happened at work. Well, you look terrible. Get some sleep. I'll keep Tommy quiet. James collapsed on his bed, his mind racing too fast for sleep despite his exhaustion. He'd solved it. They'd tested it. It worked. But what did that mean? Would they thank him and send him back to mopping floors? Would they fire him for overstepping? He finally dozed off around 8, waking at noon to Tommy jumping on his bed. "Daddy!" Mrs. Rodriguez made pancakes. James hugged his son, breathing in the little boy's smell of syrup and morning cartoon residue. "That sounds perfect, buddy." Over pancakes, Tommy chatted about school, about his friend Marcus, same name as the CEO, James noted with amusement, about a field trip to the zoo next month. "Can we go to the zoo too, Daddy? Just us?" "Sure, Tommy. Soon. You always say soon." The words hit harder than they should have. Tommy was right. James was always too tired, too broke, too busy surviving to do the things normal dads did with their kids. "I promise," James said. "We'll go to the zoo. This weekend, if the weather's good." Tommy's face lit up. "Really? Really?" At 1:30, James dressed in his only suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral and hadn't touched since. It smelled like mothballs and hung looser than it had 3 years ago. He'd lost weight, worn down by stress and irregular meals and the grinding exhaustion of his double life. He took Tommy to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. "You look fancy, Daddy. I have a special meeting at work. Are you in trouble?" James knelt down at Tommy's level. "No, buddy. I think something good might happen, but I'm not sure yet." He kissed Tommy's forehead and headed to Nexus Technologies, arriving at the main entrance instead of the service door he usually used. The receptionist looked at him with confusion until he explained he had a meeting with Mr. Nguyen. Dr. Hayes met him in the lobby. "You clean up well." "I didn't know if I should." "You're fine. Marcus wants you in the presentation to the Pentagon team. They need to understand what we fixed and how." "Dr. Hayes, I'm not sure I should." "Mr. James." She looked at him seriously. "You saved this company. You get to be part of this. Now come on. They'll be here in 30 minutes. The Pentagon team arrived precisely at 3. A general, 2 colonels, and a civilian technical advisor. They reviewed the test data from the morning, asked pointed questions about the previous failures, and wanted to see a live demonstration. Chimera performed perfectly. The civilian technical advisor, a woman with gray hair and sharp intelligence behind her glasses, asked the question James had been dreading. "What changed? You've been reporting cascade failures for 6 months. What did you fix?" Marcus nodded to Dr. Hayes, who nodded to James. "Mr. James identified the problem," Dr. Hayes said. James explained the timing synchronization issue. James stood, his mouth dry, acutely aware that he was addressing a general and colonels who controlled $100 million in funding. The cascade failures were caused by harmonic interference between the quantum gate operations and the classical system's clock cycles. He began. His voice steadied as he moved into the mathematics, explaining the resonant cascade pattern, the interference calculations, the elegant simplicity of the timing offset solution. The Pentagon team asked technical questions. James answered them all, his Stanford training coming back in full force. He drew diagrams, walked through the mathematics, and demonstrated why the solution worked. When he finished, the civilian advisor looked impressed. "That's sophisticated analysis. Which consulting firm did you bring in?" "No consulting firm," Marcus said. "Mr. James works here." "Which department?" "He's our night janitor." The silence in the room was absolute. The general spoke first. "Your janitor solved this." "Our janitor has an almost complete PhD in applied mathematics from Stanford with a specialization in quantum computing," Dr. Hayes said. "He just happened to be cleaning the testing facility when he saw our problem on the whiteboard." The civilian advisor laughed. "That's the most unlikely story I've heard in 20 years of government contracting. It's also apparently true based on mathematics." "Mr. James, why are you working as a janitor?" James told the short version. "My wife died, medical bills, baby needed immediate income. Stanford seemed like a different lifetime." "That's a waste," she said bluntly. "But it's also good luck for Nexus. We'll recommend contract approval. This system is ready for deployment. After the Pentagon team left, Marcus asked James to stay. They sat in his office, just the two of them. "Mr. James, I need to ask you something important." "What do you want?" James blinked. "Sir, you saved this company. The contract is approved. Our stock will skyrocket tomorrow. 1,500 people will keep their jobs because of what you did. So I'm asking, what do you want?" I need to keep my job. I need to take care of my son." "You'll keep a job here," Marcus said, "but not as a janitor. We're hiring you as a senior research engineer, reporting directly to Dr. Hayes. Starting salary is $180,000 plus benefits and stock options. You'll work on Project Chimera and future quantum computing initiatives." James couldn't breathe. $180,000. That was more than he'd ever imagined making, even with his PhD. That was enough to pay off the medical debt, to move to a better apartment, to give Tommy the life he deserved. "There's more," Marcus continued. "The company is giving you a one-time bonus of $250,000 for solving the Chimera crisis. And we're establishing an education fund for your son. Full ride to any college he gets into." James put his face in his hands. He was crying, and he didn't care. 3 years of grinding poverty and exhaustion and fear, all of it crashing down in a wave of relief so powerful it hurt. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Why so much?" "Because you saved us when you had every reason not to," Marcus said simply. "You were our janitor. You could have walked past that whiteboard and gone home and let us fail. Instead, you risked your job, the job you desperately needed to help solve our problem. That's not just brilliant. That's character." "I have to pick up my son," James said, looking at the clock. It was 3:40. He was late. "Go," Marcus said. "Take the rest of the week off. Start your new position Monday." "And Mr. James? Thank you for everything." James ran to his car, drove too fast to Tommy's school, and arrived 15 minutes late. Tommy was waiting outside with a teacher, looking small and worried. "I'm sorry, buddy. I got held up at work." "It's okay, Daddy." But Tommy's eyes were wet. He'd been scared. James knelt down and hugged his son tight. "Tommy, I need to tell you something. Something really good happened at work today. Did you get a promotion?" "Something like that. Things are going to be different now. Better. We're going to move to a nicer place, and you know that zoo trip I promised. This weekend, and guess what? We can afford a dog now. If you want one." Tommy's eyes went wide. "Really? A real dog? A real dog? We'll go to the shelter this weekend and pick one out." Tommy screamed with joy and hugged James so hard it hurt. That night, after Tommy was asleep, James sat on his couch and cried. He cried for Sarah, who should have been here for this. He cried for the 3 years of struggle and fear. He cried from relief and exhaustion and the surreal impossibility of what had happened. Then he pulled out his laptop, the one he hadn't opened in 3 years, and looked at his unfinished thesis. Optimization algorithms for quantum classical hybrid systems. He'd been so close, just 3 months from defending it when everything fell apart. James opened a new document and began to write. Not the thesis that could wait. Instead, he wrote to his former advisors at Stanford, explaining what had happened, asking if it was possible to complete his degree part-time while working at Nexus. The response came the next morning. Yes, they said. Absolutely yes. They'd been sad to lose him. They'd be honored to have him finish. The story broke 2 weeks later. A journalist heard about it, somehow, probably from one of the Pentagon team members. The article appeared in Wired. The Janitor Who Saved Nexus. How a Stanford dropout solved a $100 million crisis. It went viral. Good Morning America called. NPR wanted an interview. Ted reached out about a talk. Suddenly John wasn't just a researcher at Nexus, he was the janitor genius. A human interest story about persistence and hidden talent and single fathers doing whatever it takes. James hated the attention at first. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who'd been in the right place at the right time with the right background. But then the letters started arriving. From single parents thanking him for showing them hope. From people who'd left education early and felt inspired to go back. From janitors and housekeepers and low-wage workers who'd been made invisible and finally felt seen. From students interested in mathematics and quantum computing because of his story. You're an inspiration, one letter said. You show that education and talent don't disappear just because life gets hard. Thank you. James kept that letter in his desk drawer at Nexus, where he now worked in a proper office with his name on the door. Dr. James John. He'd finished his PhD defense 2 months after starting at Nexus. He'd moved to a 3-bedroom apartment in a good school district. Tommy had a dog named Photon because light is made of quantum particles, daddy, and was thriving in 2nd grade. Mrs. Rodriguez still watched Tommy sometimes, but James paid her 3 times what he used to and helped her with her medical bills. She became family. 6 months after the Chimera breakthrough, Nexus asked James to lead a new quantum computing division. He said yes, on the condition that they establish a scholarship program for people in difficult circumstances who wanted to study STEM fields. The Nexus Second Chance Scholars Program launched with full funding. A year after that, James met someone. Rachel was a teacher at Tommy's school, kind and patient and understanding when James explained his history, his loss, his fear of letting someone new into the fragile life he'd built with his son. They took it slow. Tommy approved. High praise from a now 8-year-old who was protective of his father. 2 years after the night that changed everything, Nexus Technologies moved into a new headquarters building. Cutting-edge architecture, state-of-the-art laboratories, a quantum computing research center that was the envy of Silicon Valley. In the main lobby, they installed something unusual, a glass-enclosed whiteboard covered in equations. A brass plaque beneath it read, "The James Solution, discovered March 15th by Dr. James John, then a night janitor, now director of quantum research." A reminder that genius can be found anywhere, that talent doesn't announce itself, and that the most important solutions sometimes come from the most unexpected places. This board remains as Nexus found it, a testament to perseverance, the power of education, and the courage to help others even when the world overlooks you. James stood before it on the building's opening day, Tommy beside him, now 9 years old and already talking about studying mathematics like his dad. Rachel stood on Tommy's other side, her hand in James's. "Is that really what you wrote, Dad?" Tommy asked, studying the equations. "That's really what I wrote. Late at night, when I should have been mopping the floor." "It's beautiful," Rachel said. "I mean, I don't understand any of it, but it's beautiful." "It's just mathematics," James said. "Just patterns and relationships and truth written in numbers." "It's more than that," Marcus and Gwen said, joining them. "It's proof that we should never assume we know everything about the people around us. Every person has a story. Every person has value. We almost missed yours entirely." James looked at the whiteboard, at the equations that had changed his life. But more than that, he looked at Tommy, at Rachel, at the second chance he'd been given. "Sarah would have liked this," he said quietly. "She always believed I could do anything." "She was right," Rachel said, squeezing his hand. That night, James and Tommy went to the zoo, their 5th visit since James's life had transformed. Tommy ran ahead to see the penguins while James followed at a more measured pace, enjoying the simple pleasure of spending time with his son without the constant fear of bills and eviction and insufficient money. His phone buzzed. An email from a graduate student at MIT who'd read his story and wanted advice on pursuing quantum computing research despite financial hardship. James sat on a bench and wrote a thoughtful reply, offering specific advice, encouragement, and a reminder that setbacks didn't mean failure. They just meant the path was longer than expected. "Dad, come look. The baby penguin is playing." James put his phone away and joined his son at the penguin exhibit. He was right where he needed to be. A father, a scientist, a person who'd survived the unsurvivable and came out the other side. Not unchanged. He would always carry the grief of losing Sarah, the memory of those desperate years, but stronger for it, grateful for it, in strange ways he could never have imagined. 3 years ago, he'd been a janitor who'd given up his dreams to survive. Now he was a man who'd learned that dreams don't die. They just wait. Wait for the right moment, the right chance, the right whiteboard in the middle of the night. And when that moment comes, you pick up the marker and solve the problem. Because that's what survivors do. That's what fathers do. That's what people who've lost everything and rebuilt from nothing do. They pick up the marker and they solve the problem. Tommy took his hand as they walked to the next exhibit. James held on tight. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness is never wasted, and that even broken path can lead to beautiful places and change of lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Arena, because your support keeps stories like this alive and spreading. Tell us in the comment what you would have done if you were on that plane. Or has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life in ways you didn't expect? We'd love to hear your story.